Okay, so picture this for a second. You're sitting at your kitchen table. It's a random Tuesday night, and you pull up your 401k balance just to see where things stand. And there it is, $500,000, $500,000. And honestly, for a second, you feel pretty good. Like, wow, okay, I actually did something right. Maybe you even allow yourself a little smile. $500,000. That's real money. And then, almost immediately, this quiet, nagging voice creeps in and goes, "But is that actually enough?" Because you've heard the horror stories. You've seen the articles that say, you need 2 million, 3 million, some absurd number just to retire without living in fear. And suddenly, that warm, proud feeling curdles into something closer to anxiety. You start doing math in your head, badly, because who does retirement math well at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday? And the whole thing just spirals. If that scenario feels a little too familiar, honestly, you're not alone. This is like one of the most common financial anxieties people carry around quietly for years. My name is Steve, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, retirement planning, and why a number that sounds enormous on paper can feel so terrifyingly small the moment you actually try to live off of it. It's kind of my thing. I read the studies, I run the spreadsheets, I talk to people who are actually doing this, actually retired, actually living on their savings. And I try to translate all of that into something real, something you can use. And here's what I want to do today. I want to actually answer the question, not with vague reassurance, not with fear-mongering headlines either. I want to walk you through what $500,000 really buys you, the actual lifestyle, the actual monthly income, the actual trade-offs. Because once you see the real numbers, something interesting happens. The fear either gets a lot more specific or it disappears entirely. And honestly, by the end of this, you might realize that $500,000 is either way more livable than you thought or that you need a very different plan than the one you're currently on. Either way, you'll actually know. And knowing in this whole money game is basically everything. Let's get into it. Here's the first thing that trips almost everybody up. And I mean almost everybody, including me back when I first started paying attention to this stuff. We fixate on the lump sum, $500,000. It's a big, round, satisfying number to say out loud, but that number by itself tells you almost nothing about your actual life in retirement. What matters, the only thing that really matters, is the income that number can safely generate year after year without running dry. Think of your retirement savings less like a treasure chest and more like, an orchard. You don't eat the trees, you eat the fruit. And if you chop down too many trees too fast because you're hungry today, you're going to have a very lean, very scary harvest 10 years from now. So financial planners use something called the safe withdrawal rate to figure out how much fruit you can pick each year without killing the orchard. The classic rule of thumb, and I want to be clear, it's a rule of thumb, not gospel, is 4%. You withdraw about 4% of your total savings in year one, adjust that amount for inflation every year after, and historically, that approach has a strong track record of lasting through a 30-year retirement. And so let's do the math, because this is where it gets real. 4% of $500,000 is $20,000 a year. That's about $1,667 a month. Now, I watched a lot of people's shoulders slump the first time I say that number out loud. $20,000 a year? That sounds rough. That sounds like ramen noodles and turning your thermostat down to 60 in the winter. But, and this is important, that $20,000 isn't your entire retirement income. For most Americans, it's a layer on top of Social Security. And Social Security, love it or hate it, is not nothing. The average monthly Social Security benefit right now is somewhere around $1,900 to $2,000, depending on your work history and when you claim it. Stack that on top of your $1,667 a month from your portfolio, and suddenly you're looking at something like $3,500 to $3,700 a month in combined income. That's not lavish. Let's be honest about that. But that's also not eating cat food in the dark, which is the image a lot of us secretly carry around in our heads when we think about not having enough. That's a real, livable, dignified monthly income for a lot of places in this country. The takeaway here, and I want you to actually sit with this, is that you need to stop asking, is $500,000 enough, and start asking, what monthly income does $500,000 combined with my other income sources actually produce? Because the anxiety lives in the vague, scary lump sum. The clarity lives in the monthly number. Go find yours. Pull up a calculator right now, honestly, and figure out your combined number. It changes everything about how this conversation feels. Okay, so here's the part nobody wants to hear, but it's probably the single biggest lever in this whole conversation, bigger than almost any investment decision you'll make. Where you live will determine whether $500,000 feels like abundance or feels like a slow-motion crisis. I want you to imagine two people. Both retire with the exact same $500,000. Both get the exact same $1,667 a month from their portfolio. Both have similar Social Security benefits. Financially, on paper, they are twins. One of them lives in San Francisco. The other lives in, let's say, a small town outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. The person in San Francisco is going to be white-knuckling it. Average rent for even a modest one-bedroom apartment out there can eat up more than their entire monthly retirement income before they've bought a single grocery item. It's brutal. It's genuinely one of the most expensive places in the entire world to exist, let alone retire. The person outside Knoxville? Completely different story. Their housing costs, if they own their home outright, and this is a big if we'll get to in a second, could be just property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, maybe $400, $500 a month. Suddenly that same $3,500 combined monthly income isn't just survivable, it's actually comfortable. Dinner out on a Friday, a little travel a couple times a year, gifts for the grandkids, a real life, same $500,000, wildly different realities. It's kind of wild when you actually lay it out like that, right? This is why I always tell people, and I say this a little bit as a joke, but I mean it completely seriously, your zip code is a bigger retirement variable than your stock picks. You could spend years agonizing over which index fund to choose, which is fine, that matters. But if you retire in a high cost of living city without adjusting your spending or your location, no amount of clever investing is going to save you from the math. And look, I get it. I really do. Uprooting your entire life, leaving the town where your friends are, where your grandkids are, where the church you've gone to for 30 years that's not a small ask. That's not just a financial decision. That's an emotional identity level decision. I'm not sitting here telling you to just pack up and move to rural Ohio because the spreadsheet says so. Life is more complicated and more textured than a spreadsheet. But here's the actionable piece. I do want you to at least run the numbers for your actual location, honestly, brutally. What does housing cost where you are? What does healthcare cost? What do groceries cost? Because a lot of people carry around this vague sense of, I'll figure it out. And that vague feeling is exactly where financial stress breeds. Specificity is the antidote to anxiety here. Get specific about your location's real costs, and you'll know almost immediately whether $500,000 is going to comfortably support you or whether you need a plan B, whether that's relocating, downsizing, or working a few more years to pad the number. All right, I need to talk about something that honestly keeps me up at night more than almost any other retirement variable, and that's healthcare, because this is the expense that people plan for the least, and it hurts them the most. Here's the thing about healthcare costs in retirement. They're not linear. They don't creep up slowly and predictably like, say, your grocery bill. They can hit like a truck. One diagnosis, one surgery, one extended hospital stay, and suddenly the tidy little budget you built completely falls apart. Fidelity actually does this analysis every year. They estimate how much the average retired couple will spend on healthcare throughout retirement, and the number is honestly staggering. We're talking well over $300,000 for a 65-year-old couple, and that's not even counting long-term care, which is a whole separate monster. Now, before you panic, because I can feel some of you starting to panic, That number is spread out over 20 plus years, and it includes Medicare premiums, deductibles, copays, prescription drugs, dental, vision, all of it combined. It's not a check you write on day one of retirement, but it is a very real, very persistent drain that a lot of people simply don't budget for because Medicare, in their minds, is supposed to just cover everything. It doesn't. It really doesn't. Medicare has gaps you could drive a truck through. Dental, vision, hearing aids, and long-term care are largely not covered, and those are exactly the things that become more likely as we age. Kind of a cruel irony, honestly. So what does this mean for our $500,000 retiree? It means healthcare needs its own line item, its own mental bucket, separate from your fun money and your housing money. Some financial planners suggest keeping a dedicated health savings buffer or maximizing contributions to an HSA while you're still working, if you have access to one, because that money grows tax-free and comes out tax-free for medical expenses. It's honestly one of the most underrated accounts in the entire financial system, and almost nobody talks about it. I think about my own grandmother here for a second. Small digression, bear with me. She had this incredibly tight, disciplined budget in retirement, really impressive stuff. Tracked every dollar in this little notebook. And then she needed a hip replacement and later some dental work that insurance barely touched, and I watched years of careful saving get eaten up faster than I would have ever imagined possible. It wasn't reckless spending, it wasn't a lack of discipline. It was just life, showing up uninvited, the way it does. The actionable takeaway here is this: don't just budget for your monthly grocery bill and your Netflix subscription. Budget for the version of you that gets sick, that needs a procedure, that has a bad year. Build a healthcare cushion on top of your regular withdrawal plan, even if it's modest. It won't make health problems disappear, obviously nothing can do that, but it can mean the difference between a medical setback being a stressful inconvenience versus a total financial catastrophe that unravels everything else you've built. This next one is a little more technical, but stick with me because it's honestly one of those things that sounds boring until you realize how much money it can save or cost you. And I mean tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes more. Most people, when they retire with $500,000, probably don't have it all sitting in one single account. It's spread out, maybe some in a traditional 401k or IRA, some in a Roth IRA, some in a regular old taxable brokerage account. And here's the thing, nobody tells you. The order in which you pull money from these different buckets can dramatically affect how much you pay in taxes over your lifetime, which in turn affects how long your money actually lasts. Think of it like this. Your traditional 401k money is like food that's already been paid for, except the tax man gets a cut every single time you take a bite. Your Roth money is like food you already fully paid the tax on up front, so every bite is completely yours, tax-free, forever. And your taxable brokerage account is somewhere in between, with its own quirky rules about capital gains. A lot of people, understandably, just pull from whatever account is easiest or whatever they think about first, without any real strategy. And that can push them into higher tax brackets than necessary, or trigger bigger Medicare premium surcharges. Yes, that's actually a real thing. It's called IRMAA, and it's one of those sneaky little penalties that catches people totally off guard, or just generally waste money that could have stayed in their pocket. The general strategy a lot of planners recommend, and again, everyone's situation is different, please don't take this as bespoke advice for your exact life, is to spend down your taxable brokerage accounts first. Let your tax-deferred and Roth accounts continue growing. Then transition to tax-deferred withdrawals, saving the Roth money for last, since it grows tax-free the longest and has no required minimum distributions hanging over it. Why does this matter so much for our $500,000 retiree specifically? Because at this size of a nest egg, every dollar of unnecessary tax is a dollar that could have meaningfully extended how long your money lasts. This isn't a rich person's problem, some kind of luxury concern for people with millions. This is arguably more important for someone at $500,000 because there's simply less room for error, less cushion to absorb mistakes. My honest, actionable advice here: Talk to a fee-only financial advisor, even just for a single session, specifically about withdrawal sequencing before you retire or even fairly early into retirement if you haven't already. It's genuinely one of those areas where a couple $100s of professional advice can save you thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, over the following decades. It's not glamorous. Nobody's making a viral video about the beauty of tax-efficient withdrawal sequencing, but it works quietly in the background for years. Let's shift gears for a second because I don't want this to just be a numbers lecture. Money is never really just about the numbers, is it? Underneath every spreadsheet is a person trying to feel safe, trying to feel like their life meant something, trying to not be afraid. And here's something I've noticed talking to people who've actually gone through this transition. The psychological adjustment of living on a fixed, finite pool of money is honestly harder than the math itself. You spend 30, 40 years with a paycheck showing up like clockwork, and there's a certain rhythm, a certain security in that, even if the amount varies. And then one day, that rhythm just stops. And instead, you've got this big number sitting there, and every withdrawal can feel like you're watching the ocean slowly recede from the shore. That fear, even when the math genuinely works, even when you're following the 4% rule perfectly, even when your withdrawal sequencing is optimized, that fear doesn't just automatically go away. It's not purely rational, it's emotional, it's almost primal, honestly. This deep, old fear of running out, of becoming a burden, of not having enough when it matters most. So here's what I want to say to that fear gently. You are allowed to build in margin. You're allowed to live a little below the theoretical maximum your plan allows, specifically because it lets you sleep at night. That's not financially irrational. That's actually incredibly wise, because a plan you can't emotionally sustain isn't really a good plan at all, no matter how clean the spreadsheet looks. And on the flip side, I've also met people who are so terrified of running out that they never actually enjoy any of the money they worked their entire lives to save. They die with huge account balances, having denied themselves every small joy along the way out of fear. And honestly, that's its own kind of tragedy. Money that's never spent, never enjoyed, isn't really serving its purpose either. So the takeaway here is softer than the others, but maybe more important. Talk to someone, a partner, a friend, a therapist, an advisor, whoever, about the emotional weight this transition carries. Don't just build a spreadsheet, build a little bit of peace alongside it. So what does $500,000 actually buy you in retirement? Honestly, it buys you a modest but genuinely livable income, somewhere around $20,000 a year from the portfolio itself, more when combined with Social Security. It buys you comfort in a low cost of living area, and real strain in an expensive one. It requires a serious healthcare buffer that most people underestimate. It rewards you handsomely for thinking carefully about which account you draw from and in what order. And underneath all of it, it asks something emotional of you, a willingness to trust the plan you've built, while also giving yourself permission to actually live. Here's what I really want you to walk away with. $500,000 is not some magic finish line. And it's also not some tragic shortfall. It's a tool. And like any tool, what it builds depends entirely on how thoughtfully you use it, where you live, how you spend, how you protect yourself against the unexpected, how honest you are with yourself about the trade-offs. If you're sitting there right now with something close to that number or working toward it, don't let the vague, scary version of, "Is it enough?" run your life. Go get specific. Run your actual numbers for your actual location, your actual health situation, your actual life. Because clarity, honestly, is the closest thing to peace that money can actually buy you. You've worked hard to get here. Whatever your number ends up being, give yourself the gift of actually understanding it. That's where the real security lives.